Bom dia, pessoal. Eu me chamo Ramon Santos, tenho 23 anos, sou um homem branco, de barba e cabelos escuros, olhos também escuros. Estou usando uma camiseta verde em frente a uma cortina iluminada por luz natural. Eu sou analista de projetos do British Council no Brasil e é um prazer para mim estar aqui dando continuidade à ELT Week 2024. Vamos seguir com o tema ensinar inglês como um idioma adicional para estudantes autistas. E eu convido para se juntar a nós a Carolina Assumpcao de Abreu para a sessão de hoje.
Good afternoon, I'm Carolina Abreu. I'm a bilingual educator from Brazil. And today I'm going to share with you very briefly about the research I did when I got my master's degree from the University of Westminster. Now, also, I would like to thank the British Council for this incredible opportunity. And more than a decade ago, a psychiatrist specialized in adolescents came to the school, was working back then to talk to us secondary school teachers. And at a certain point of his talk, he said was, well, if you haven't encountered an autistic student in your classes so far yet, and be prepared because this day will come sooner or later. And the alarming tone in his voice echoed inside my head for quite some time. And that was also what sparked in me my interest to start investigating and studying and researching about autism and what I could do to be the teacher my potential ASD student would need. And just to give you a quick view of my studies background, I would like to present some significant changes in the number of the population of people with autism. According to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention from the United States, in 2000, there would be one diagnosed in a group of 150 children, whereas in 2020, this number would go up to one diagnosed in a group of 36 children. Unfortunately, there are no prevalence studies in Brazil, but the Ministry of Education estimates that there was an increase of 280% in the number of autistic students between 2017 and 2021. And also, there was a study carried out by the University of Cambridge in association with the University of Newcastle, when they found out that 2% of 57 children are diagnosed with autism in the United Kingdom. As the number of autistic children seem to have skyrocketed, it is expected that consequently there will be an increase in the number of autistic pupils in mainstream schools. And as an attempt to investigate how to efficiently teach English as an additional language to autistic learners, taking into consideration their social communication impairment, I interviewed 11 teachers and I asked them the following questions. How much do teachers know about their autistic students? What are teachers' preferred methods and techniques to teach pupils who are on the spectrum? How does an autistic student behave when the language teacher proposes tasks to be executed in pairs or groups, and when they have to interact with their peers? How can educators establish a comfortable and safe environment in language classes for autistic pupils to develop social skills? And hopefully I would be able to answer the main question, how our preferred methodology, our choices impact the language learning process of pupils with an autism. And Barry Cohen, a very important researcher, scholar in the field, professor from the University of Cambridge, characterizes autism according to two features: social communication impairment and narrow interests. We know that people with autism have from mild to severe difficulty in interacting, exchanging ideas, taking turns, sustaining a conversation, eye contact, reading body language. And we also know that some of the activities more commonly embedded in a language learning environment, they require those skills from the students. However, learning an additional language can empower an autistic individual to thrive in social situations, as evidenced by researcher. Vivienne Wire remarks that learning a foreign language can play an essential role in the development of social awareness skills. And also Sharan says that speaking a second language can be advantageous to ASD children in terms of improving sustained attention. Also, Kenworthy stressed the importance of using a script to assist ASD individuals in the most common social situations, as well as to model social skills. And here they also stress the importance of that being done not only by teachers, but also by parents who can, again, model social interactions, how they would take place. But the question remains the same. How? How can I empower those students? How can I help them develop their social skills? There is vast literature on the practicalities of dealing with an autistic pupil in the classroom. However, there is still a new world of possibilities to be explored regarding methodology. In her book, Reaching and Teaching the Child with Autism, Mackenzie presents the learning preferences and strengths model. This model consists of 4 types of preferences. Introversion, the child who may take longer than the others to process information and reflect on what they have been learning. This child will probably feel more compelled to attempt a task if an example is provided beforehand. And we are now again going back to the importance of modeling. The second would be sensing, someone who better learns by using their 5 senses so that they can truly grasp the main points of what they're learning. And in this case, tasks would be broken down into smaller steps, and teachers would use lots of opportunities to put learning into practice, lots of hands-on activities. Also thinking, this one concerns decision-making process based on what is fair. There's also an interest for clear routine and rigid rules, another very strong trait of autistic students. Finally, judging, someone who finds joy and pleasure in predictability, order, together with the completion of tasks. A child can, of course, display more than one preference, and Mackenzie agrees that this should be taken into account as strengths that operate in favor of ASD pupils. Another study that dialogues with Mackenzie's ideas is the one carried out by Jovanone, indicating the effectiveness of combining pupils' preferences and specific interests when thinking of methodology, planning activities, themes, and cross-curricular learning. By doing so, teachers can promote engagement, which very likely will lead to interaction. And for this one, I would like to give you an example. I was teaching this boy in particular. He was in year 2. And the task was for him to write a story. Everyone in the class was writing a story, and he had to think about the structure of a narrative, and also adding time order words to organize his ideas, to organize the events in the story. And this boy in particular was obsessed with the solar system, all the planets. And the only way for him to be interested in that task and be eager to try, willing to try, was when I said to him, what if the characters in your stories were the planets in the solar system, and you could write about events and things that would happen between them? That was when he very happily sat down and used his graphic organizer to jot down some ideas and start writing his text. And another approach would be the multisensory learning. And students with the specific learning differences may find it difficult to understand linguistic features of a language if the teacher's approach is primarily communicative. And this would take us back to the communication impairment, since this approach would require from ASD students to infer rules, or when or how to use these or those language features. Thus, the multisensory learning, combining auditory, visual, and kinesthetic, could provide autistic students with the right gradual learning pace. It also praises the advantages of drilling for grammar, pronunciation, and vocabulary, arguing that it helps learners memorize sentence structures they can modify, adapt whenever necessary. Cormers and Smith emphasize that the main difference between other approaches and the multisensory learning is the importance of explicit teaching of linguistic structures, slower pace of progress, and frequent revision. The multisensory brings up the efficacy of visual support, a consensus amongst scholars, researchers who write about teaching ASD students. Visuals can be a great ally to shortening explanations so that students can stay focused on what is being described or presented. And they are a concrete representation of what students may fail to understand if a spoken description is the only one provided by the teacher. And here we also include the use of realia in the classroom. And another study carried out by Azaro, Sadler, and Bach is about the self-regulated strategy development as an intervention to stimulate and enhance persuasive writing. And this approach would probably be more suitable for secondary school students. This approach consists of 6 instructional stages, namely developing background knowledge of the topic they will write about, discussing it, modeling it, memorizing it, supporting it, and finally getting into an independent practice. And also includes steps of self-regulation, goal setting, self-monitoring, self-instructions, and self-reinforcement. The results of the study demonstrated that students improved their writing in general and the features of their production, including cohesion and coherence, in addition to the number of words in each composition. The relevance of this approach to help ASD students lies in the fact that it tackles self-regulation skills, planning, and discernment of textual genres. And finally, about my research. When I interviewed those 11 teachers, I divided them into 3 groups according to the age and year groups they taught. So group 1, preschool and primary school teachers, group 2, secondary school and college teachers, and group 3, private tuition teachers. And the data collection was analyzed according to 3 themes. 1, preparation to teach ASD pupils, how much information teachers would get from the school board, and trainings and studies and books they would read and workshops they would have an opportunity to participate. Theme 2, their choices, their preferred methodology or techniques, the need for differentiation, adaptations they would do, not only adaptations in terms of the activities they would give students in the classroom, but also curriculum and teaching the 4 skills. And theme 3, about pupils' attitudes towards the English lessons, their willingness to learn English, the engagement in pair and group work. 6 out of 11 teachers had never received any formal training, support, or adequate information about their students' diagnosis from the school board. So some and most of them decided to look for courses and look for training themselves. Teachers used visuals to teach new vocabulary or to illustrate input constantly. So visual aids was in all the interviews, was present in all the interviews. Teachers included games in vocabulary and a grammar form practice. They considered pupils' preferences, specific interests, and learning styles when planning their lessons. And for this one, I would like to highlight one teacher who talked about using task-based learning. And she told me that throughout the research and the task that was being done, she thought that her student could be a bit lost because he got stuck when researching about that topic. He got stuck at a certain point. And we talked about that. Knowing that autistic students have narrow interests, specific interests, and they can be hyper-focused, of course they would get stuck at something that would call their attention. So instead of insisting on going all the way to the end of the task, we would just narrow down the question, the main question, and we would say to them, okay, so I can see that you were clearly interested in this point in particular. So we are going to carry out from here. So you're going to write about it, or you're going to prepare a presentation about it, but always value their special interests. And teachers also reported the effectiveness of using various objects, rely again, music and movement for vocabulary acquisition. And they also mentioned the fact that they would involve the older students in secondary school or high school environments. They would involve their students in decision making. So we are going to do this task in groups. Who would you like to work with? And just being very clear with them about your expectations and making them part of that process and making them part of that decision making, and saying that their opinion is valued, they are cared for, they are seen. Undoubtedly, there is no single way to teach English as an additional language, let alone teaching an individual with any condition that may affect the trajectory of their learning process. Yet, it is absolutely possible to find what works in determined settings with determined students. And ultimately, we can conclude that teachers invariably seek means to teach English as an additional language to their autistic students. They always seek the best way to do it. Their methodological choices can have a serious and positive impact on the learning process of their pupils once they understand that competences of those individuals with autism might develop differently, and the outcomes might be demonstrated in a non-standard way. And it's also worth trying. Thank you.
Foi a sessão da Carolina Assumpcao de Abreu sobre ensinar inglês como um idioma adicional para estudantes autistas. O British Council agradece imensamente a participação da Carolina e a participação de todos através do chat, mas infelizmente a Carolina não foi capaz de se juntar a nós para responder algumas questões. Então, recomendamos que entre em contato com a Carolina para as redes sociais, para informações adicionais, e fica o nosso agradecimento à participação de vocês aqui. Nós continuaremos ainda hoje às 16h, dentro da nossa temática, ainda trabalhando a diversidade e a inclusão no dia de hoje. Muito obrigado.